Hey there, it's Joseph.
Brad?
Jacob from RoboFlow, and we're here to talk about computer vision in 2021. So 2020 was a super exciting year in computer vision. A lot of new technologies were released, and now we're going to kind of reflect on those and look forward to what might be coming in the next year. So Joseph, why don't you start us off with some of the things that you were most excited about in 2020?
Yeah, one of the things I was most excited about was the rapid acceleration of state-of-the-art models, right? So, I mean, it was in early March that we had Efficient Det come out from the Google Brain team, and that broke state-of-the-art in terms of the object detection task. And then just 1 month later, YOLO v4 came out, the YOLO v4 paper. And what was notable about that was it was the first paper, or the first YOLO model in the YOLO family of models that wasn't from Joseph Redman.
Right.
And that's pretty notable. And then right after that, YOLO v5 was released from a different author. And that, I mean, doesn't necessarily outperform YOLO v4 on the COCO benchmark, but it seems to localize better to some tasks. And so there was this trend of not just being the best on COCO, but generalizing to other domains. And then yet just this last fall, scaled YOLO v4 came out. And this model, again, broke the state-of-the-art on the COCO benchmark and was built using some of the training framework from YOLO v5, but with some of the techniques that, with CSP techniques that improved on the state-of-the-art even more. And that was all in 2020 alone. So the rate of acceleration, it's not just models are getting better, but the rate at which they're getting better in 2020 was pretty wild.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the thing that excites me the most is not just that the models are getting better, but they're getting easier to use. And that means that we're starting to see like all sorts of new use cases. And it's not just like Google and Tesla that are building self-driving cars nowadays. You know, basically any developer can pick this stuff up off the shelf and build, you know, whatever they can imagine. So we've seen everything from students building sushi identifiers to some like Fortune 500 companies solving some really challenging problems. And these aren't, you know, tech companies necessarily. Like we've seen everything from healthcare companies to steel manufacturers and everything in between. It's just so cool to see this technology that used to be a research thing becoming a production thing that's actually affecting our everyday lives.
Yeah, that definitely is really exciting. I mean, there's been the COCO data set, which everyone's been so focused on. And the idea was that would lead to generalizable models, but now we're actually seeing it happen. And I'm kind of curious why you guys think that is. Like, what do you think were the prerequisites that have made that happen, and why that might continue to happen in 2021?
Yeah. Interestingly, I think kind of this democratization play, you know, it's been going on and gaining steam for quite a while now. This might be a controversial take. I think Google Colab has actually really kind of propelled it. You know, it used to be you'd have to like rent these expensive GPU machines or build out a box, and like that was just kind of an exclusive sort of club. And now kind of anybody can fire up a notebook on Google Colab and go through an online course. And we've now had millions of people go through these massive online courses with machine learning and computer vision. I think you know, that just kind of like sparked the fire, and it's really spreading.
Yeah, you don't have to take a financial risk to see if it's going to work now. You can just try it out and see what happens. Yeah, that's amazing.
I think accessibility of compute in Colab is big. I think also the release of YOLO v5 is kind of a watershed moment in some ways, because it was for the most part, kind of like lone wolf person going at it who created a model that challenges state-of-the-art and also is one that was the first family model in the YOLO family models that was native to PyTorch. And so if one dimension of democratization is compute, another dimension is certainly ease of use and making that be simpler. And so instead of being in darknet, which, you know, is native to C, and it's a bit more challenging to get up and going, and yeah, you're not an aggressively, I know you've personally experienced that sort of, no. The ease with which the frameworks have made it be adaptable is also why you're seeing tasks not just on the COCO data set, but I can now try these models on my domain problem.
Totally. Actually, I think that's a great segue into kind of thinking about 2021 And I think what you described there is actually going to happen also in the deploy side of things. So right now, the training side of things and creating these prototypes has been democratized, but it's still kind of hard to actually get your project out there in the wild and have people using it. And so I think one thing that we're going to see in 2021 is a trend towards making it easy to take these like weights blobs, binary blobs that you get out of your model, and be able to actually put those into a mobile application or a web application or a hosted API, and put your project out there. And I think this is maybe a bit self-serving, but we saw this. The RoboFlow team last weekend built a hackathon project that served over 100,000 people. We built it in a weekend with some of these new computer vision models, deployed it into the cloud with some of these new tools, and we were able to hit scale and like. It wasn't just computer nerds that were playing with our painting game. Like it was a wide sort of broad applicability, and it was something that you didn't need to know anything about the AI that was judging the paintings to be able to use the thing. And I think that the deploy is the last missing piece to really make computer vision this like ubiquitous thing where it's going to affect everybody's lives, not just the developers that are kind of in the know on this new stuff. What do you think on 2021? Do you have a...
Yeah, I mean, the accessibility is so exciting, the training, the deployment, but the modeling, I think, is really going to take off again. The biggest thing we saw was that transformers were starting to eat their way into the computer vision space. So, those had kind of set the standard in natural language processing, but now they're starting to find that you can actually just treat an image just as a sequence of pixels. You don't just like you think about a sequence of words, and seeing those kind of mass scale transformers start to eat away. So OpenAI released the CLIP model, and they released DALL-E, which were based on these transformer models. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see what happens with those in the vision space.
Yeah, totally. So what is that? I mean, what would that mean for the capabilities? Like, does that? I guess you mentioned DALL-E. What do we see going forward? Like, is that going to actually transform things that people will notice, or is it going to stay in the research realm for now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for the time being, probably in research. I'm not sure if it's going to like get released, if DALL-E is getting released to everybody, or if people are going to re-engineer it or what. But that's going to be exciting.
Interesting. I mean, I might take the opposite side of that. I mean, if you look at what happened in NLP, where the cat was out of the bag with, I guess, was it BERT that was first, and then GPT-2, and then GPT-3. I think like now that OpenAI has kind of shown what's possible, and that you can steer some of these generative models to do useful tasks. We've already seen some hackers trying to steer GANs with the same sort of techniques. And I just think like I know my mind got rolling with all the possible things that we could build with these new things, and I suspect I'm not the only developer that's like itching to build stuff with it. So I think even if OpenAI doesn't release their model, I would be surprised if by the end of the year we don't have some sort of steerable generative model that can produce useful stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have a dark horse for 2021's biggest innovation coming down the pipeline, or a theme to watch?
I think I was gonna take the side that you were with Transformers eating vision and almost having like a image to vec understanding instead of having to like re-embed and uniquely understand even each respective domain problem. I mean, one thing that I'd like to see, I think that could be interesting to see, is the creation of a new COCO benchmark in some senses, or a new way to measure generalizability of models. Or you mentioned CLIP, that was trained on 400 million image text pairs, right? And the COCO data set's only in the hundreds of thousands, low hundreds of thousands. And I think that some of the limitations we saw in 2020 was almost debates about what is state of the art, because it becomes domain dependent. And so I think what would be really powerful is to see maybe like a benchmark that measures domain adaptation of a model, or maybe that's not requisite if you have like this image to vec idea where you don't have to retrain it for each domain. But something that I'm excited to work on with RoboFlow and the platform that we have to make that happen is public.roboflow.com being a place where people can start to host their data sets per domain And so you can almost like take, the off the shelf like tennis ball model and adapt that better to like what your scene is of tennis balls. And that's sort of like a micro, like empowering the every person sort of perspective. But I could also see, Microsoft who released the original Cocoa data set in 2014, coming out with someone like that, coming out with another massive data set for benchmarking or even industry benchmarking. I don't know that I'd place money on this happening, but I think we're overdue for it at a minimum, right? Like we've been benchmarking against the same thing for so long. So that's one thing I'd hope for.
I think it's interesting talking about Cocoa specifically, is if you kind of dive into some of those images, like there's a lot of errors in that data set. And so we've been kind of like, benchmarking off of this not perfect data set, and we're, are we going to get to the point where the models are so good that they're better than the human annotators were when that data set came out, almost a decade ago? And I think we've seen that with MNIST too. If you look at those models that are getting 98, 99% accuracy on MNIST, you look at the ones that they missed, and actually I think the models probably are more accurate than the humans who labeled them.
Right.
And so you kind of tap out, what that even tells you, if the model's doing better than the actual accuracy. So I think that's right, and I think generalizability is a huge thing. It's one thing to do well on Cocoa, it's another thing to do well on people's actual real world problems. So I think I would agree with that. I would be interested in more discussion around what is it that a set of ideal data sets would have to look like to make them be the new standard that researchers are pinning against to make their research be applicable to actual real world situations.
What problems do you think are not going to get solved in 2021? We've talked about a lot of things that we're really excited about, and domain adaptation and new benchmarks and transformers and reducing training costs and accessibility, but I suspect some of the low-hanging fruit there's a high neighborhood of possibilities of things that we're not going to see a general AI. Maybe you think we're ready for it in the next year, but I would take that we're probably not ready for general AI. But in terms of things that might be disappointing or places that we're going to see slower progress, what are going to be problems that are still outstanding? If I had to pose this question, what are areas where there's going to be more work to do?
Well, so on the deploy side, I think that's always going to be somewhat of a frustration of having to get all the dependencies together to stand up a model and get it to run. Of course, you have exciting things starting to happen with Onyx kind of trying to make a unified model framework, but I think this problem of getting a model that you think is working and then trying to get it actually into the production use case running at the FPS that you want it to will probably persist. Progress on it for sure, but I think that will be with us for 2021, but maybe not too much longer.
I think it's gonna be a while before we get any sort of really generalized computer vision model. Not even talking about a generalized AI, but we're starting to see beginnings of what it would look like for an unsupervised computer vision world. But I think it's going to take actually quite a bit of time for that to come and subsume custom models. And so I think we'll continue to see there being an importance of collecting a representative data set and getting it labeled by human annotators and training a custom model with custom weights. I think if you look a decade down the line, perhaps the models get good enough that isn't needed. But I think if we're talking about what is not going to change in 2021, I would be very surprised if we're sitting here a year from now and we're saying, hey, we have this supermodel that does everything.
Right. One thing that I'm thinking about too is everyone that subscribes to this channel, or if you're watching this, you should be a subscriber to this channel, that might miss out on something is reaching the one level abstracted audience of users of computer vision. So I think that in 2020 we saw a lot of momentum, a lot of deep momentum in researchers and those that are really domain experts. And those researchers are already firing on all cylinders in 2021. I mean, OpenAI's models technically came out January 5 of this year. In some senses, in 2021. So I think there's also these other audiences of if I'm a developer, how much about convolution do I need to know? Or even if I'm one level higher than that, if I'm I don't mean higher in terms of hierarchy, I mean in terms of level of abstraction. If I am a technical product manager, and I'm not writing code maybe all the time, but I certainly have a grasp of these things, or even maybe someone that has very little knowledge of ML. I think that like 2021, we're going to start to tap into some of those personas, other personas, but I still like, it's remarkable how much, in some senses, like expertise on the fringes vision is generally, and I don't see that being solved in 2021. I see this starting to tap into that, but there's so many subject matter experts that can benefit from this technology that like those that are deep in the field haven't even considered how to help.
Yeah, I think there's a big challenge there too with educating. You want those domain experts to know enough to build really cool things, but the challenge is you also need to give them the tools and the knowledge that they need to not fall into common traps. And so I think like as we continue to see this sort of expansion of machine learning from the data science realm to developers and to domain experts, things like bias in your models are things that are going to become something that needs to be talked about more generally. And I think that in 2021, especially as we start to see a lot of these people using these models for the first time, I think that a lot of people are going to trip over themselves with some of those sorts of things. And so it'll be interesting to see what we can do to educate people. And maybe it's just going to have to be something where there's a PR thing around it and it gets more widespread understanding beyond just the data scientists that have been thinking about that sort of stuff for a long time. We saw that with I think it was just a couple of years ago, the Apple Card and the credit score between men and women and the credit limits. But I think that a lot of those same sorts of things are going to apply in the vision realm, and we've seen a bit of it with like facial recognition stuff already. But I think there's probably a lot of corner cases that folks haven't even discovered or thought about yet, that as vision expands into every single domain are going to have to be addressed and be a part of that basic education of I'm coming into this data science world for the first time as a non-data scientist. Like what are the things that I need to know and watch out for, and then hopefully tools that will automatically help people not fall into those same traps.
Makes a lot of sense.
Definitely.
Cool. Do you have a let's say a less than 5% probability and greater than 1%? Like what's the outside chance of something that might happen in 2021 but is unlikely that you would or that you think might be underrated in terms of likelihood?
Well, we talked about image to vec, but I think that's going to be more likely than 5%. But I would probably go with some sort of zero-shot object detection model, somewhere in the 1 to 5.
Yeah. I guess I painted myself in a corner here because I think this is probably going to actually be more than 5%, but along those lines, like multimodal models where they take knowledge that is not just what's in the pixel data, and use outside knowledge either from what they've learned from language or potentially other things that they've gathered about metadata or those sorts of things. I think we'll start to see some, like if there was a YOLO v5 plus metadata model or a YOLO v5 plus text model that came out, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be slightly surprised to see it this year, but only because it would be like a year early. But I think that would be cool to see, and I hope people are working on that.
So there you're thinking you input the image along with some text features.
Right. Yeah. And that helps the model, understand versus just sending it a bunch of pixels with no context.
Yeah, certainly.
I think it's similar to those lines, but something that's been remarkably underserved in my head is video just being treated as images. And I think that now we have sufficient compute. Now there's enough video. There's no shortage of data, and the modeling techniques are getting there. So this isn't probably in the family of multimodal models, because I would imagine that the way that you solve modeling video differently would be with something like the sequencing of frames.
Something like an RNN for video.
Yeah, an RNN for video, right? Because like if you have a model that's doing video inference and it misses something in one of the frames, now, right now we're really naive and we're like, oh wow, like frames 1 to 7 had this thing, 8 didn't, but 9 and 10 did. 8 probably also had that, and the frame information from the surrounding frame should inform that. Yeah. And so I think it's, I don't know, maybe a 1 to 5% chance that I think we have the state-of-the-art video architecture model comes out, and that's unique and different. I think it's going to happen inevitably, but maybe not 2021.
That has callbacks to what you were talking about earlier with the transformer models coming into the vision realm, or maybe it was Jacob that was saying that. I think those transformer models seem to do quite well with data sequences, where you could add the temporal dimension, and I can see that being groundbreaking in getting to something that is less of just a sequence of frames and more of a cohesive video. Cool. Well, we're super excited to see what comes out in 2021. And if you have predictions or ideas for what you think is going to come out that we didn't come up with, or you strongly disagree with one of our predictions, we would love to hear it in the comments below. We'll be sure to fan the flames of that flame war down there. And yeah, until next time, this has been a RoboFlow Fireside Chat. We'll talk to you later. Be sure to like and subscribe.